You're listening to the Seahawks Insiders, getting you ready for Seahawks football every Sunday. Presented by Delta, the official airline of the Seahawks. Now, here's your host, Jen Mueller.
It is a holiday edition of the Seahawks Insiders podcast. John Boyle, what time do you anticipate your children getting out of bed on Christmas morning?
It's really tough to call right now because they're fully in break mode of staying up too late and sleeping too late. So they could sleep in, but if one of them wakes up at 6 a.m., we're done for. So
I can't believe that any small child is sleeping in on Christmas morning.
I'm going to be happy if we can get to 7.
Okay.
7 seems doable.
And are you fine just letting them run downstairs or run into the living room by themselves?
We have to hold them at the stairs to make sure all are ready to go. Because I can't have one of them down there tearing into a stocking while the other one's, still getting up. So we kind of block the stairs and say, wait for your sisters.
That sounds like a lot of excitement. That sounds like a lot of excitement. I'll be enjoying a cup of coffee, a cinnamon roll, and shortly thereafter, a mimosa. That is what Christmas morning looks like.
Too. It'll just be louder.
That's right. I don't have as much cleanup at my house after that one. I think it's easier for the Seahawks to celebrate this week, John. Obviously, they're coming off a big Thursday night win. It is, I don't know, interesting to hear how people are characterizing that after the weekend, right? Winning in primetime on Thursday night is great for any number of reasons, including when you watch games and you watch highlights throughout the rest of the weekend, It's way happier, right, when you're at the top of the standings. Sure. It is, however, interesting to hear how the Seahawks were getting characterized in some of those conversations as, well, they're still not a very good team. Well, they didn't really win in the most convincing fashion. And I don't know how I feel about that. Outside of offended, and I'm trying not to be offended.
It is what it is. People have their kind of prior thoughts about both teams going into that game, and the people who thought the Rams were the better team are going to convince themselves, well, they are the better team. The Seahawks it's like, yeah, but all they did is come back from 16 points down and win the game. Like, that is part of football. And, oh, by the way, so special teams, like I keep seeing they won because of a fluky punt return. Well, it's like, special teams is a pretty important part of the game, and the Seahawks are one of the very best in the NFL at this. So, yeah, I mean, look, I think both these teams are super evenly matched, as we've seen in both matchups. But this idea that the Seahawks, fluked into a win is pretty silly to me.
The numbers are not what you anticipate. But FYI, that special teams conversation, we're not just talking about the 2-point conversion. We're talking about how the Rams approach special teams altogether, right? And just not having the same setup as the Seahawks. You lost a lot of yards on special teams as the Rams. The Seahawks, meanwhile, are maximizing those opportunities. The Rams do make a move after that game in that department. But if you want to talk about where the game was won, you're going to have to look at inches in that one, not just your total yards at the end of the game.
Yeah, for sure. And if we want to talk about total yards, and let's go back to the Week 11 game, were the Rams lucky to win that one because the Seahawks outgained them by a lot? I don't know. So I think both these teams are incredibly close. The stat I saw for this game was they're separated by 1 yard and 1 point over the course of 2 games this season. These are very close teams. I have a really strong feeling we might see each other again in the postseason, and it will probably be a great game then, too.
Yes, and of course, there's still another division game to play against the 49ers. We are looking too far ahead on that one, but nothing is decided. Seattle maintains its position as the number 1 seed, and now they control their own destiny. They've got the Panthers coming up. We'll get into that matchup in just a second. But, John, there's also plenty of celebrating because Pro Bowl selections were announced. Yes. And it is really cool to see guys getting recognized. And every single one of them told us it is not truly about them. It is about the team and what they expect overall.
I just think it testifies how bought in everyone is. And, the thing you do when you have team success, not just player success. Everyone gets their chance to shine, bro. And like I said, we don't really care about the stats, bro. Everybody, whoever makes that play, we go out there and celebrate it. And I think that's just a testament of this team. So
we've heard all season from players, and especially on defense, about how connected and selfless this team is. And that's exactly the point Devon Witherspoon is making. Is they're all as excited when one of their teammates makes a big play than when they make that play themselves. And to me, Devon Witherspoon being not just a Pro Bowler, but a Pro Bowl starter is a great example of, A, that part about the Seahawks defense, but B, people recognizing it. Because this is a guy, he missed time with an injury. his stats don't jump out at you, and he actually didn't do super well in the fan voting. So this is coaches and other players around the league recognizing the kind of player he is to make him a starter and a Pro Bowler for the third year in a row.
Also, for some of these guys like a Leonard Williams to get the recognition right off the bat, I think you were standing there with me last year, John, when
he was not happy.
We truly thought there was a huge mistake at the league level, and there was. He did end up getting recognized, but he was not happy, could not figure out what it is that he had missed out on, and it took being an alternate kind of after the fact to get in there. So for him to get that recognition off the bat, I was happy for him, and you can tell this is an even more connected team because of his response.
Yeah, it went from like last year, it seemed like he was more affected by not getting it than he was by the honor of getting it. Sort of like the players who hate losing more than they love winning. You hear people say that. It was kind of like he's excited about it, but is more like, now he's just so focused on what this team is doing, what's still out there for this team, that I think again, he's happy for the honor, but there's bigger things in front of this team right now.
And that's what we have heard from everybody. In fact, in the locker room, I almost overlooked the fact that Thursday night clinched the playoff spot.
Yeah.
Like, we were so focused on the fact that, you could be the number one seed, right? What does this mean for the playoffs? There was actually a celebration for clinching a playoff spot. And it just kind of showed where all of their thinking was going even after Thursday night's game.
And you forget, we've been around this team long enough that, the playoffs don't seem like that long ago, but you forget for, how young this team is and how many guys are new, that this is the first playoff experience for a ton of guys on this roster. Yeah.
And guys who have maybe deserved more during the course of their career. And I'm thinking about Demarcus Lawrence. So he's a Pro Bowler. He has made such a big impact. I love how low key he is, and I also love how Leo talks about his line mate.
I think he's been a huge addition on this team. One of my favorite additions this year, obviously because he plays next to me and he plays on the defensive side of the ball. So he has a big impact on me and on this defense. His leadership, his effort and his ball skills are, elite. There's so many times where he's not getting the ball out, but you see on tape he's just hunting for the ball all the time. And it shows up in those few times where he does get the ball out, but, we see it in the defense meeting room all the time, even when it doesn't come out.
As Leonard Williams said, one of the big additions this team made this offseason, and this Pro Bowl announcement is a good time to kind of go back and look at the offseason that John Schneider had. Really not just the offseason, the year John Schneider has had, the Seahawks general manager, goes out, signs Sam Darnold, makes a really tough decision at quarterback. That's not an easy thing when you have a good quarterback, which Geno Smith is, to just walk away and trade him. Does that, get Sam Darnold after the trade. Sam Darnold's a Pro Bowler. Signs Demarcus Lawrence, who's a guy, obviously had a great career, but I think coming in, people wondered, he's coming off an injury, he's far enough in his career. I think some fans are how good is this guy really still? And he has been amazing and rightly named a Pro Bowler. And then Cooper Kupp, the numbers don't show up, but man, that guy means so much to this team, and he is such a big part of what they've done all year, especially on offense. And then to go out and make a trade for Rashid Shaheed, who has been, you can argue they don't win any of the last 3 games without him. He's had a huge role in all 3 of their last wins. So it's really cool to see, John Schneider, there's a lot of buzz about him, Executive of the Year, and it feels long overdue. It's kind of crazy he never won that in building this thing up the first time that, they go to 2 Super Bowls and have all the success they had. So hopefully this is his year, and it would be very well deserved. And we haven't even talked about the draft classes, by the way, which have been awesome in recent years.
Yes. And when people try to describe the culture around the building, there's a couple of different ways that you can do this. And we'll hear from Devon Witherspoon in just a second on what he knew the Seahawks defense and the team could be. But guys go back to that connectedness, right? That caring about each other, the brotherhood. And that is 100% Mike Macdonald. But even before Mike Macdonald, it is John Schneider. John Schneider knows the name of every person in this building. He says hi to everybody. When he encounters you on game day, he's probably going to give you a hug. And when he says goodbye to you, he's going to say, love you, buddy. Or he's going to ask you, how you doing, buddy? There is a lot that has happened in this building that the coaching staff 100% deserves credit for. But if you want to know who is carried on the culture of this team, it is John Schneider behind the scenes in all the ways that you think of. as a tremendous leader of an organization, not just a GM of a football team, but he is a guy that you would follow. It doesn't matter what industry he's in. And I don't know that it is common across the board. I don't know because I've never had another GM here like that. But it is cool when people recognize that. And all these little things behind the scenes make a big difference.
Well, another thing I'll add to that is we hear so much from players about, this selflessness and lack of ego, and that is what we've been hearing from this front office forever. You hear John Schneider talk about and all the guys under him, that Nolan Teasley's and Matt Berry's and all of them. It's like they talk about not having egos and no closed doors. I mean, you can, other than the draft room, I can't go walk in the draft room. That would be frowned upon. But most of that area that for a lot of teams is very closed off to only these people. Like, it's not just coaches and personnel people working together, but it's, everybody in the building. If you have a reason to be there, It is kind of an open door policy in this building. And that is something John Schneider has really built from day one, where it's just like a very welcoming, loving place, and that's really showing in this team.
Yes, and he'll pull back the curtain, which is cool. Now, sometimes time has to pass, but he will pull back the curtain. He will explain, this is what I was thinking. Here's the mistake I made previously. Here's where I was learning from that lesson. Here's what we did. It is a really, really cool environment. I hope that John Schneider gets the recognition that he deserves. And when we go back to what he has managed to build here, Devon Witherspoon had this conversation when he was talking about Pro Bowl, and it goes back to the beginning. But then we'll continue this conversation. Before I get ahead of myself, let's just hear what Spoon says about where this team is going.
I think it was from the get-go, to be honest, though. Like I said, a lot of the players on defense was already here. So we had a year into the system and everything. I think for offense, it was just a little bit different because they had a lot of new pieces added on in off season. So it was like it probably took them a little bit more time to build that relationship. But I don't think it was a problem with building it. I mean, once we realized what we had and the way we practice and the way we go about our business, it wasn't hard to see, So I just think we just took it on as a challenge.
Yeah, it's been the kind of 2-year building process of this, which, again, so much of that starts with John and then bringing in Mike, and what they've sort of built from figuring some stuff out last year, especially on defense, as Devon Witherspoon alluded to. Like, that group kind of had the running head start on the offense with the continuity, and to see it go from like, okay, we see something building here, some promise here that didn't quite work out the way they wanted. They missed the playoffs by tiebreakers, but really showed something was building. And then, man, the point Mike McDonald's made so many times, like, it started in these off-season workouts of like everybody being there in April and May, and like you could just feel it in the building, and just top to bottom, culture-wise, talent-wise, it's been pretty clear for the better part of the year that something special is building here.
Well, and I wanted Spoon to kind of clarify things, because everybody said when we got together and we decided what we wanted to be. And I wondered, was there any other alternative, right? Is there another option? Did they get together and say, no, we're actually going to be a little bit more finesse, or no, we're actually going to be a little bit more like this? And I don't see this team being anything other than it was, but it sounded like it just became really evident. They were willing to have the conversations. It just became really evident. Going back to those OTAs, it was interesting to hear Sam Darnold this week say it was really important to get that, because you can practice all you want on your own, but to feel the rush, to have that presence in the pocket, it does not work if you don't have everybody there for OTAs so that you can start to dial this in. And so it really is interesting when you're able to trace back and go, oh, that practice, when we stood there and we watched it, it didn't seem like it was that big of a deal.
Yeah.
It's a big deal.
Yeah, again, like, over the years, we've seen where, like, certain veteran guys, they don't show up, and it's fine. Like, look, does Marshawn Lynch need OTAs in his 6th season in the NFL? Probably not. And it's probably more, like, it's less of a big deal when you have a lot of continuity coaching-wise and player-wise. But it's like when you're building something new and you have, especially on offense this year, everything's new, the coaching staff, the scheme, the quarterback, like that buy-in from the beginning of the offseason program, that's a big reason why the Seahawks are where they are.
Yeah, and I think, again, it's recognizing the talent you have, the opportunity that you have, and taking advantage from the beginning. If you are a fantasy football owner who has made it this far, Congratulations. There is a big opportunity ahead, and our Fantasy Insider has more.
Thank you, Jen and John, and welcome to Fantasy Football Super Bowl week. If you're watching this, it's a good chance you've made your fantasy Super Bowl. We congratulate you, but there's one more week to go, and we give you the players who can help you bring home a fantasy championship this season. Let's start at quarterback. Jacoby Brissett should bounce back this week. He finishes a QB1 in 9 of his last 10 games, and we should see a high-scoring matchup between the Cardinals and the Bengals. Also, MVP frontrunner Drake May going against the New York Jets. The Patriots have a good matchup there. They're trying to lock up the AFC East, so start Drake May too. A running back from the Seahawks, go with Kenneth Walker, coming off of a big game. And the Carolina Panthers ranked 24th in rushing yards allowed to opposing running backs. Also, rookie Ashton Genty had his breakout game last week. And this week he faces the New York Giants, which has been an outstanding matchup fantasy-wise for opposing running backs throughout the season. Ride momentum, go with Genty again. At wide receiver, Jacoby Myers of the red-hot Jacksonville Jaguars. They face the Indianapolis Colts, who rank 30th in fantasy points per game allowed to wide receivers. And also at wide receiver, Jawan Jennings of the San Francisco 49ers. The Chicago Bears over the past 4 weeks ranked 25th in fantasy points per game allowed to wide receivers. At tight end, go with Harold Fannin. Good matchup for him against the Pittsburgh Steelers. Good luck this week in your Fantasy Football Super Bowls. Check out my Fantasy Football Super Bowl guide on Seahawks.com, the news tab, Fantasy Insider, and also be sure to check out my lineup rankings and lineup spotlights on rotoballer.com. Good luck in the big game, and we'll see you soon. Thanks you, and back to Jen and John.
Thank you, Scott. I tell you what, before we break down the Panthers, let's pause for a second for our presenting sponsor.
Delta Airlines is bringing more big wins to the city of Seattle. With nonstop flights to over 60 destinations worldwide, we're moving Seattle forward with 2 new routes to Rome and Barcelona starting May 2026. And with thoughtfully designed cabins, premium service, a seamless travel experience, and our new Delta One Lounge for eligible travelers, your personal off-season is looking better than ever. Visit Delta.com to book your next trip.
When we look at this Panthers team, John, this is the one that I've had on the calendar as being a real question mark, and the one that quite honestly scares me most out of the 2 remaining games. And let me be very clear.
Wow, look at you trying to give the 49ers bulletin board material, Jen.
I literally was just about to say, this is not bulletin board material. My point being, we know what the Rams are going to do, right? We know what they're capable of. We know what that offense looks like. We know what they've been able to do with all of the injuries, right? This is not to say they're not a great team, but there's familiarity with that team. I have no idea what to expect from a Carolina Panthers team that's gone win-loss, 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 and that has a quarterback with 12 game-winning drives in the last couple of years, 6 this year alone.
Mm-hmm. They're a really hard team. I mean, are they the team that's good enough to beat the Rams, or are they the team that's bad enough to lose twice to a Saints team that the Seahawks, quite frankly, blew out of the water? So it's like, I don't know. And that's kind of, that's more common, honestly, in the NFL than what we're seeing the Seahawks doing. Like the truly elite, 12, 13 win teams, those are more rare. You see a lot of these kind of middle of the pack teams where it's like, I can't figure this out week to week what the Seahawks are going to be. And you're right, that is kind of scary. And they're obviously very motivated. They're playing for a division title right now, and Dave Canales has that team kind of on the up from where they were last year. So it's exciting for them, and it does make a interesting opponent where I just don't know what we're going to see on Sunday. I have no idea.
Well, and when you go into the year and you see the Panthers are on the schedule, you're like, we'll count that as win. That'll feel good in December, right? Because you're thinking back to when Dave Canales, so former assistant here in Seattle, when he took over, and you're watching some of those losses, and you're just like, man, Dave, why did you take that job, right? Like, there's been so much turnover. Well, I tell you what, since taking over as head coach, he is 11-5 in one-run games. He is 4-1 in overtime. That is tied with Atlanta for the most overtime games played since 2024. Again, I don't know what to expect, but that sounds an awful lot like Pete Carroll coached teams that knew how to finish games and keep it close.
Yeah, if you just hear Dave Cannell's in a press conference, especially in a post-game locker room celebration, like, there's Pete Carroll's fingerprints are all over him, and it makes sense. I mean, he started his career with Pete so long ago when he was a young coach, and came up from USC with Pete, and so like there's so much of his coaching DNA comes from Pete. And there is a lot about this team that you look at, you're like, that does feel familiar, and even some familiar names as well. So it's gonna be a fun test.
Well, familiar names who are playing well. Damian Lewis is rated as one of the best right guards in the league when it comes to pressures allowed. Mike Jackson, was in that secondary.
He did us a solid against the Rams, that's for sure.
Yeah, he did. Well, he leads the league with 17 passes defensed. He is not very happy about how his time in Seattle ended. He's looking for a little bit of revenge. Look, it's hard to tell, again, what to expect when you look at overall numbers. Here's what I feel safe in saying regarding the offense, John. I feel safe in saying they are going to run the ball. That has been the most consistent part of this game. And you've got a couple of running backs there who have been really consistent over the course of the season. Yeah,
I mean, they're, again, you talk about Dave Cannell's having a little bit of Pete Carroll in them. Like, they're going to lean on that running game, and they have two really good backs who've, over the course of the year kind of split the workload. And as we've seen with the Seahawks, when you can do that over the course of a year, you can keep guys fresh late in the season. So it's, we've seen the Seahawks. I mean, they've faced a gauntlet of good running teams and stood up and played really well. This will be another good test.
Yeah, you know what I would like to hear? I would love to hear the halftime conversations to that point.
Yeah.
Because for at least the last 3 weeks, you're starting to get some of those rushing yards in the first half where you're like, this streak is in jeopardy of not having a 100-yard rusher.
I thought for sure last week they were going to get it.
They were right on back. And then it's like the switch flips. I don't understand. I mean, I kind of do, but I really want to know what allows them to make those halftime adjustments like that.
I mean, I think it's a combination of really good coaching and good veteran players who can, because there's not a lot of players in the NFL that can, like Leo talked about this, like some of the things they were changing, the way they were scheming it up. Like, I think if you ask some younger defensive lines to do that mid-game, it'd be a disaster. But you have guys like Jaron Reed and Leo and Demarcus Lawrence, and even though Byron Murphy's a young player, he's a really smart player and a really damn good player who, we could get into the Pro Bowl talk again, and maybe he should be there, but that's not the conversation. But anyway, they have all these guys.
I hope that they're not available at all, period.
Exactly.
That's why I'm not even going to discuss it anymore.
We're not going to care because they're going to be busy that week.
That's right.
But these players can make these adjustments on the fly and change how they're playing their gaps and how they're attacking their own game. But last week, if you look at the numbers, it's like, the Rams average 3 point something a carry, and it doesn't look that bad. But in the first half, it's like they just kept getting those 5-6 yard runs where every third down felt like so short. And that's where you talk about, the Seahawks can't get to Stafford. It's like, well, yeah, because Stafford's getting rid of the ball in 2 seconds. And sure enough, we see late in the game, they're stopping the run, and you're getting those third and longs, and now they're putting pressure on Stafford. They're hitting him. They didn't get the sacks, but they forced him into some bad throws.
Yeah, he is top 10 in being able to get the ball out quickly. I'm not sure that Bryce Young can say the same thing. Here's what I do know. The most fourth down conversions in the league for that Panthers offense. So third down, it's important, but they are going to take some chances on fourth down. Bryce Young also been really good at those fourth quarter comebacks, like I mentioned. And Leonard Williams recognizes that, but they don't want anybody to score in the fourth quarter or beyond.
What we call the fourth quarter and something like that situation that you're talking about is the death zone. That's something that, we refer to it on this team, and that's a place where we like to thrive as a team. So we know that, he's a good quarterback in the fourth quarter, and we're going to consider the fourth quarter death zone. So I think, as a defense, we're going to want to step to the occasion, step to the plate, and we're going to want to thrive in that situation.
Yeah, it's, really we keep going back to this conversation's come up a few times, the Tennessee game. Like, Seahawks were in control of that game. They won it, but they gave up a couple late touchdowns, and the defense was pretty unhappy about that. I was like, okay, they just won the game, but guys were not happy with that. And really going back to that game in, what was that, week 12, ever since then, Seahawks have been very strong defensively to close out games, and they did it again. Probably the most impressive one to me is what they just did last week, where the Rams they were getting chunk play after chunk play. They're driving up and down the field, and then all of a sudden you get 3 straight 3-and-outs. You get, I think it was like 5 stops in the fourth quarter. Yeah, the Rams did go get the touchdown in overtime, but what that defense was able to do after playing a ton of plays, by the way, in the fourth quarter of that game to allow the comeback to happen was so impressive.
Well, and we heard several guys say miscommunications, which is interesting because this is such a connected team. Now, Mike McDonald said maybe we put a little bit too much on their plate, but John, Lumen Field was as loud as I had ever heard it on Thursday night.
Yeah.
If I'm thinking about Sunday in Carolina, I'm thinking that miscommunication goes down a notch just because the 12s aren't there disrupting you when you're on defense,
right?
right?
It's such an interesting topic when you talk to defense guys. Like, obviously, they love the crowd. Like,
yes,
you
please,
love the fans being
loud.
That's awesome, and it disrupts the offense too. So, like, they're not saying, "Hey, fans, let's go silent while we're on defense." But it is an interesting challenge they face because, like, this is not the simplest defense, and they are making adjustments a lot. So there are times, unfortunately, where the miscommunications can happen.
Yeah, well, on the other side of this, the Seahawks really good at executing 2-minute, 4-minute offense. Sam Darnold is among the best when it comes to those fourth quarter comebacks as well. And it turns out that he learned, from a pretty good one in those situations.
The one that always comes to mind is Tom. Tom Brady, the way that, I just always admired him growing up, watching him play. And, I was able to actually watch him play quite a bit, even, still as I was in the league, watching him kind of, do his thing in a 2-minute drill. Like, I never felt like his body language never changed, whether he was in the first quarter of a game or the last 2 minutes. So that was something I always admired and yeah.
One of the best traits we've seen in Sam Darnold, and one we hear players talk about, is like how steady and level he is and just doesn't get rattled. And that's when that matters the most, is like you're not making too much in the moment. You're not panicking as the clock's winding down. You're not thinking about, if I don't finish this drive, we lose. You're just like, okay, let's go out and execute. And that's what allowed him to bounce back from what was looking like another tough, multiple turnovers. It cost us the game. But like, he put that behind him and was nails down the stretch. Just made the best throws he made all game in that game-winning drive in overtime, and that's a real skill that not every quarterback has. There's some really, really talented quarterbacks over the course of this league who could do great things, but when the moment was big, it was hard on them.
Yeah, well, and they also practice this. I've watched it many times in practice. It's just one more thing they need to execute on. The only thing we have left to execute on, it is 2 things we need for a Seahawks win. We will do that after a word from our presenting sponsor.
Take your own off-season with Delta Airlines and explore new routes from Seattle to Rome and Barcelona starting May 2026. Plus, with nonstop flights to over 60 destinations worldwide, Delta is moving Seattle forward one adventure at a time.
Okay, John, I got a couple of things we didn't really talk about that I'm going to think are going to be very important.
Let's hear it.
Well, I think a fast start for Seattle. Now, we talked about this before, but Carolina is really good at this. In fact, they have scored points on their opening drive 10 times this season. That is tied for the most opening score drives in the NFL. 6 touchdowns, 4 field goals scored. I do think Seattle needs to get off to a fast start to swing things in their direction. And we mentioned it before, special teams. We don't often talk about kickers, but Jason Myers and Ryan Fitzgerald are 2 of the best in the league. And I'm not necessarily talking about field goals, although that's fine. It's kickoffs and how they're utilizing and kind of scheming up those dynamic kicks. It is a game of inches, and they are the best at kind of holding the returners, having a number of kicks that they can go to. And field position, these teams are top 5, right? After a kickoff, what the opponents are starting at. Seattle's number 1, I believe Carolina's at number 5. So continue the positive special teams play. It's not just the kicks. Boy, there was some good coverage tackles last week. So that's what I'm saying. Special teams plays a bigger role and get off to a fast start. You?
I want to see more out of this run game, where coming out of the Indianapolis game, that seemed like a pretty big concern of, like, they've been running the ball pretty well, and then all of a sudden it felt like a big step back. And granted, the Colts played really well defensively in that game, but it's like to come out, rush for 171, you get the big plays from Ken Walker, you saw a fun little change up with Rashid Shaheed for a big gain. this is something they're going to need if they're going to make the run that they feel like they're capable of in the playoffs. And obviously, you got a really tough one coming up in Week 18. So I want to see first and foremost to help you win this game, but I want to see the progress to be the kind of running team that they've really wanted to be all year and haven't consistently been able to find. Second thing, we talked about all the late game heroics out of Carolina and their quarterback. Just be up big in the fourth quarter and don't, going back to that conversation with like Leo and like death zone football is like great way to not let a quarterback come back and get you in the fourth quarter is don't really make it a possibility for him. Have a nice, 2-score lead late in the game that he can't come back from.
I love this. I was playing on a short game or like a close game. John's like, just blow him out. You don't have to worry about it.
I'm not saying you got beaten by 30, but
I know. One more time. I'm overthinking.
Don't put it in a position where they get the ball back in a 1-score game.
Yes, agreed. That'll be good for all of our hearts.
Yes. That was a tough one to write. There's some big rewrite energy going on.
Let's end. John needs a break from that.
I deleted a lot. Happy to do it. Don't get me wrong. I did appreciate that our baseball writer friend Ryan Divish was in the press box for the first time all football season, and he got extras.
Yeah, he got extras. Yeah. It's his favorite during the baseball season. He loves rewriting during extras. Well, we love talking about the Seahawks team. We hope that you are loving a holiday and time with family. We will see you next week for another edition of the Seahawks Insiders Podcast.